Welcome to Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe, where you'll find the unique, the bizarre, and sometimes the haunted. Feel free to look around, peruse the items, and never fear, there's nothing here that bites. Hard anyway. Well, hello there. How wonderful it is to see you back at Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe. I am your shopkeeper, Chris Baker, and today a very interesting item indeed. If you'll look over here on the wall, this is a painting several centuries old. It depicts the three fates of Greek mythology, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, holding the strands of humanity's fate in their hand with a pair of shears to snip some lives shorter than others. Now, it is one thing to hold the strands of fate of an individual human in one's hand, but it is another to hold the strands of a multiverse and the countless lives therein. And therein lies the heart of today's episode of Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe. So let's pull out the mutoscope and take a look at the new Disney Plus series, Loki Season 2. So when the first season of Loki came out in July of 2021, I didn't know what I was going to think about this series, because Loki has been one of those villains in Marvel. Started out as a villain, not a villain I cared very much about. Then he became very complex in his villainy, and then by the time the series came about, he had the bit of a turn. He and Thor's relationship had been repaired, and then, of course, the character was killed off in the Infinity Gauntlet saga. So when I found out they were going to do a series about Loki, I was one, interested how they were going to bring him back after he had been killed off, and two, was I going to care about this character? Because while it started out being a character I didn't really care much about, the character did become interesting. The character became a little more multifaceted, and they brought some dimension into his villainy and then his face turn, if you want to use some wrestling terminology. But how were they going to bring him back? They had played with time travel in the Infinity Saga. Were they going to use that? What were they going to do? They were talking about the multiverse, and this was going to delve into those multiverse themes that we're going to see in this current phase of Marvel movies and TV series. So there was a lot of interest there, and it turned out I really liked Loki Season 1, and the way they ended off Loki Season 1, where really, the bad guy won. He who remains won, and Loki comes back to the TVA that has changed and now has statues of He Who Remains, played by Jonathan Majors, and he has taken over the TVA. You're like, oh my God, this is quite a cliffhanger to end this story on. I was really interested to see where they were going to pick up with this story. And while we're in a section of this podcast episode where I'm going to try not to be too spoilery, I don't want to give too much away, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this in non-spoiler terms, because I think we're really going to dive into this. But it was not what I thought it was going to be. This season took a turn right away that I thought we were going to pick up where we left off, and we did. But we didn't stay there very long, and this turned into a completely different story than I thought the one we were going to get. And I will say that the first 4 episodes of this 6-episode season are a little confusing, are a little slow, and I wasn't sure. Like, once we got through that 4th episode, it ended on a bit of a bang, or an unraveling, if you will. But I at that point, I was like, okay, things are picking up. This character, something happens to them, and I'm not sure where it goes from here. But up until that point, I was like, I didn't even know where the show was going. I didn't even know what the end game, no pun intended, was for this season of Loki. Then episode 5 kicks in, and episode 6, and those two really made this season of Loki. So if you haven't watched this, go watch season 2 of Loki. Like I said, you gotta get through the first 4 episodes. It's not that they're not bad. They're good episodes. It's just, you're just not really sure what the hell's going on. There's a lot of scientific terminology and science fiction terminology bandied about temporal theories and, astrophysical mechanics and stuff like that it's above me. I like to consider myself a fairly smart guy, but I'm like, this is advanced class right here, and I don't know what they're talking about. I just nod and smile and watch the pretty colors. But there's a lot of interesting things in those first 4 episodes. But like I said, it's just really hard to see what the light at the end of the tunnel is. Once you hit episode 5, it all starts to make sense and all the pieces of the puzzle click into place. And those last 2 episodes really make this season of Loki. And if you love the characters, if you love the actors, I mean, Tom Hiddleston does a fantastic job in Loki. I've become quite a big fan of his in general over the years and over the things he's done, whether it's in the MCU or outside of the MCU. Owen Wilson is great in this. Wunmi Masaku as a B-15. Absolutely love her. I love seeing her show up in things. She's done a ton of stuff, but I think probably the first place I really noticed her, I mean, she was in that Black Mirror episode Playtest, which was nice to see her show up in the last season of Black Mirror's in Jonah's Awful. She plays Joan's lawyer. But I think the first place I really remember her is showing up in Playtest and Black Mirror in 2016. Also in The End of the Effing World, she was in a few episodes of that. But the first place she really caught my eye and really gave me a sense of, I really like watching her. I think she does a really good job, was in Lovecraft Country. She played Ruby Baptiste, which I was really disappointed we didn't get a second season of that. But she was a standout in that series. And I was so happy to see her as B-15 in Loki. And I wish her character had a bigger role to play in this season, but it's the Loki series, so you got to focus on him. And Owen Wilson is kind of the Loki sidekick in this, so you really get a lot of focus on those two and the Victor Timely character. So I understand why they couldn't focus as much on the B-15 character, but Wunmi Masaku does a wonderful job with that character. They introduced the OB character played by Ke Huy Quan in this season, and he was such a delight to see show up in this. He fit in so well as this kind of nerdy tech guy, author. They did some really interesting things with him, and he's got such an energy on the screen. Like, he's just having the time of his life, no matter what role he's playing. And he did a wonderful job in this. It's a shame that I don't know if we'll get a 3rd season of Loki. We'll talk about that more in the spoiler section. But it's a shame because the series is good. The actors are all good. But I would love to see Ke Huy Quan show up again in the MCU. If it's not in a Loki season 3, hopefully somewhere else down the road we'll see him back in the MCU at some point. And then Jonathan Majors, for all his legal troubles, I'm not talking about that, but as an actor, he is a wonderful actor and does a really good job with the He Who Remains character, the Victor Timely character. I really enjoyed that as well in this season. But all in all, a really good season. And you have to really look at this Loki series as 2 chapters of the same story. You can't take it season by season because this really is one big long story arc for Loki, from where he starts to where he finishes, and we'll get into the details of that in the spoiler section. But when you're watching this, don't watch it as, well, this is just the 2nd season, it's self-contained. It's not. It's the second half of a bigger story. So if you haven't watched Loki season 2, it would probably behoove you to rewatch season 1, because especially that last episode, there's going to be some callbacks to the very first episode of Loki season 1 that will help things make a lot more sense. Not that they don't remind you of all those things in the previously on segment of the episode, but it will help. So yeah, go check it out. Loki season 2. It certainly wasn't perfect. It did have some pacing issues with those first 4 episodes and some storytelling issues, because it felt like there was a little bit of meandering, and they just didn't know how to fill out 6 episodes for this season. So we went on some and not even side quests. It just felt like we went places just to go there, and we spent too much time there. But once you get to episode 5 and 6, it makes it all worthwhile and definitely worth watching. One of the better entries in the MCU, especially when it comes to the Disney Plus TV series that they're doing. So go check it out, Loki Season 2 on Disney Plus. If you haven't watched it, if you have, we're going to press on with some spoilers and really dig into this season and into this story, or at least for the most part. But if you haven't watched it, go check it out and then come back and hear my thoughts on Loki Season 2. But from here on out, we are going to get into some spoiler territory. So one of the things I was a little disappointed in when the first episode of the season started out with Loki Season 2, when they wrapped up Season 1, you had He Who Remains was killed by Sylvie. Loki heads back to the TVA to find now that it is run by He Who Remains, or Kang the Conqueror, whoever you want to call him. They've got the statue of him in the middle of the TVA, and that's where they end it. And you thought, oh no, the bad guy won, and now he's taken over. But we have Loki come back because Season 2 essentially picks up quasi where Season 1 left off, and Loki starts time slipping, where he inadvertently starts slipping to different times and different places, and they spend the first couple episodes figuring that out. That's where we get the Ouroboros or Obi character, Ki Hui Kwan. His character is introduced, and he helps them figure out that. And then they have a little bit of a storyline with the whole temporal loom thing. And then the temporal loom doesn't work, and they've got to find Victor Timely, and they go back in time to find Jonathan Major's character, Victor Timely, another variant of Kang the Conqueror, or He Who Remains. And just the first 4 episodes feel like just a bunch of little side quests filled with a lot of science fiction jargon. And Loki, and I'm a huge fan of science fiction, and Loki has to be probably one of the more science fiction centric stories in the MCU, which I think is cool because, time travel and all of these temporal theories and quantum physics and all that stuff is very interesting, but it can also be weighed down by the terminology. And I felt myself trying to, I had to keep running to keep up with these first 4 episodes. You had a little bit of a story arc, the Victor Timely story arc with Miss Minutes and Renslayer, which it had a lot to do with the episodes they were in, but didn't really have a lot to do with the bigger picture and the bigger story of Season 2. So the first 4 episodes, while they were entertaining and interesting, but interesting in I don't know where we're going with this. I'm really excited to see where we're going, but I have no idea where we're going. It was interesting in that way, but it all really felt like a big wind up to these last 2 episodes of Loki Season 2, where the TVA has been destroyed because the temporal loom didn't work the way they planned it. Loki's time slipping into all these times, seeing all these main characters like B-15, like Casey, like Mobius, and seeing them in their lives before they were conscripted into the TVA, which was kind of interesting to see all of that, which led to one of the coolest scenes of the last couple episodes between Loki and Obi, who is this science fiction writer who, that's what he wants to be, as a science fiction writer, but he is like an astrophysicist for his day job. He doesn't want to do that. That's boring. He wants to write science fiction that apparently nobody wants to read. But that was kind of interesting. But there was a really cool conversation between Loki and Obi about the difference between the science and the fiction of science fiction. And that's what the episode was called, Science/Fiction. And it was probably one of my favorite episodes of the 2 seasons of Loki, where Loki learns to control the time slipping, and he is going back in time to varying points, further back and further back, trying to correct what happened that went wrong with the temporal loom and caused the destruction of the TVA and everything. He keeps going back and learning from his mistakes, and then he like spends a century learning astrophysical mechanics or something like that. And I like how they put the title plate up there, a century later or something to that effect. But that was really interesting, and it was kind of fun to watch all of the humor in it and the tension in it. It did build tension. It did set stakes as to, if he doesn't get this right, then the whole world, all these multiverses are destroyed. Him going back and kind of speeding them through things was quite funny and quite enjoyable. And that, like I said, had to be probably one of the most interesting and fun episodes. My wife watched these 2 seasons of Loki with me, and I never saw her more engaged in an episode than she was with that one. And I too, I felt very engaged in this episode, which was quite enjoyable. And then the season finale, the series finale, because from what I understand, they only planned on doing these 2 seasons, like 2 chapters in a book or 2 parts to a big story. They don't, from what I've heard, some of the writers or the head writer talking about that, they don't plan on doing it. They're not doing a season 3. It was just this story, and where they left it off, it leans into that, and I'm fine with it the way they left it off. And we'll talk about that coming up. But episode 6, the final episode of this season, was very much like the science/fiction episode 5, in that Loki is in this loop where he realizes that in order to keep the sacred timeline from fraying off and splintering off, he has to keep Sylvie from killing He Who Remains, which she did at the end of season 1. That caused all this havoc. And it was a really interesting time loop that they did, because they kept emphasizing the fact that he had to kill her to stop her. She kept saying it. Victor, or the He Who Remains, kept saying it. Everyone kept saying he had to kill Sylvie to stop her from killing He Who Remains, and putting him in a difficult position to kill somebody that he cares very much about. Now, they didn't delve into the relationship between Loki and Sylvie as much as they did in the first season. It really felt like they were doing this weird kind of Loki falling in love with himself sort of thing, which seems like a very Loki thing to do. But they didn't do it that much with this. I mean, Sylvie was relegated to kind of a tertiary character in this season, unfortunately, because I really enjoy her. I really enjoy Sophia DiMartino. She does a really good job with this character. I wanted to see more of this character, and there's a possibility we may see more of her in the future, down the road, in showing up maybe in other Marvel movies or TV series. But yeah, in this, she just wasn't very utilized. And you have to say that for a lot of these characters. I mean, the main characters in this season were Loki, obviously, Mobius, and Obi. Everyone else was either a secondary or a tertiary character. Victor Timely, I think, was probably a little bit of a main focus in this as well. But even there within, it was to an end that kind of takes him out of the equation. We'll talk about that coming up. But I liked this scene in episode 6 where they keep doing this time loop where Loki keeps going back and he's trying to talk Sylvie out of killing He Who Remains, but the only option he has to kill her. It's even set before Loki that he either kills Sylvie or He Who Remains. It's going to go one way or the other, and he finds a way around it, a loophole. And I loved how they kind of played into the Loki is the trickster, the god of mischief. And these time loops are like the trickster getting tricked. But he is the ultimate trickster. He is the ultimate god of mischief. And he outwitted everyone by essentially replacing He Who Remains as the guardian of all these different timelines. And it was a really cool scene when he walks out on that catwalk and all of these threads of time have kind of exploded all around him, and he's gathering them up as he's walking down this catwalk, and the visage of him as Loki, part of the TVA, kind of tears away, and we all of a sudden see Loki, the god, emerge with his green armor and his cloak and his, horns. And we get to see that wonderful scene of him trudging along with all these timelines and coming upon that throne. And that's, I think, one of the coolest arcs, and one of the best done Marvel arcs in the history of the MCU, for my money. One of the best, if not the best, because and that's why you have to look at this from a standpoint of two parts of the same story. This is a 12-episode story and not two 6-episode stories, where at the beginning you had Loki talking about his glorious purpose. Actually, the first episode of Loki Season 1 is titled Glorious Purpose, and constantly talking about how he deserves a throne, he deserves to rule, he, has this glorious purpose. And by the end of Season 2, he doesn't care about any of that. All he cares about are saving his friends, because for the first time, he's never felt alone. He feels like he has friends. He feels like he has a family. Now, granted, this variant of Loki never had the reconciliation that he had with Thor, like the one we saw in the Infinity Gauntlet saga. But this version of Loki, these are all his friends at the TVA, and he's just doing what he's doing to try and save them. It's for selfish purposes, to a degree, if you can call wanting to have a family, wanting to have friends being selfish. But that is why he's trying to save everything. And in the end, he sacrifices all of that. He sacrifices everything that he wants. The family, the friends, the people around him, the people that care about him, the people that he cares about. He sacrifices all that to save them all by taking up this mantle, taking up all of these timelines and using his God energy to keep them from dying off. And he finally gets his throne. He finally becomes the God that he has to be, as he puts it. I'm paraphrasing, but the god that he needs to be. And while he's not ruling Asgard, he does have a throne that he sits upon, and he is now the ruler of all these timelines. And you see that shot where he's sitting on that chair, that throne, with all these timelines almost coming off of him like a cloak, and he's sitting there alone, but with a contented look on his face. And it was such a tragic and sad ending to see this character that we've come to love over the years, from his time of attacking New York and causing all that havoc to now he's become such a beloved character. And Tom Hiddleston just does a wonderful job with this character from every iteration of it, from every time he's played it. He's just done a wonderful job, from the villain you hate to the character that you've really come to care about and want him to have the happy ending. He doesn't get the happy ending, but he gets an ending where he's finally got something to be proud of. He's proud of what he's doing and the sacrifice he's making. And I think that is just a beautiful way to end, like I said, this story, which has come into 6-episode chapters. And if you look at from where he started in season 1, episode 1, to where he ended in season 2, episode 6, it's just such a wonderful and sadly beautiful story arc that probably some of the best writing that has taken place in the MCU. Not just the TV series on Disney Plus, but in the MCU as a total, I think. And from what I understand, this is the end of the Loki series. They're not going to do a season 3. Now, they said they weren't going to do a season 2 of Kenobi for Star Wars and Lucasfilms, and they're backtracking on that. I could see if demand is big enough that they would maybe consider that. But I think for all intents and purposes, this is the story they wanted to tell. Doesn't mean we'll never see Loki again. He does have a higher purpose and a higher calling now, that glorious purpose that he's always said he has. He finally has found his glorious purpose, but it doesn't mean we'll never see him again. It'll be interesting to see how this character plays into future Avengers movies and future Marvel titles. And this sets up in place the multiverse, where you have all these different variants and variations of various universes. They even make a reference to, they've got all of these Kang variants that are out there, and it's mentioned that there are a lot of them out there. And I like how they reference that there was an incident with a Kang variant on the 616 universe. That's our universe. That's the MCU proper in one of the adjacent realms. But they took care of it. That's the quantum realm. That's what happened in Quantum Mania. And really leads us to wonder where they're going with the future of the Kang storyline, because Kang was going to be a really big part of this. They were leading up to the Kang Dynasty movie, which was going to be kind of an endgame level event before they lead into Secret Wars. Jonathan Majors has been a big part of that. Now, Jonathan Majors has gotten himself into some legal troubles. We'll find out over the next few months, I'm sure, how that is all going to play out. And I don't know what you do here. I suppose whether he is convicted or found innocent or things are thrown out, I think that'll play a big part into whether he stays on as this character. I don't know. I really like him. All his legal troubles and the things that he's been accused of doing aside, I really like him as Kang, He Who Remains, the Victor Timely character. I thought he does a really good job of playing different versions of the same character. I really have enjoyed his work in this role. I don't want to see him leave this role, but also, what choice do you have? If he's convicted and they have to fire him, they have to do what they have to do. I'm not commenting on that at all. But then what do? Do you just get rid of the whole Kang storyline and have to rework everything you had planned on doing with this phase of Marvel? I mean, you could do that. It seems kind of silly. I think they set it up a little bit with this, kind of having Loki replace him as the guardian of the timelines. That could be the start of them kind of phasing out the Kang story and bringing something else in. I know there's been a lot of talk about Doctor Doom coming in. I want to see them stick with Kang. I think what you have to do, the only choice you have is to recast the character. I don't like that. I don't want to do that, but Marvel's done that before. Like I talked about earlier, they did it with Rhodey Rhodes and War Machine. They've done it with other characters. It's not unheard of. And I think you've got too much invested in this Kang storyline to just let it go to waste. I'm sure there's a ton of scripts out there already written now. Granted, they can rewrite scripts and redo things, but I want to see I want to see this story play out. I think Kang is an interesting villain in the MCU in the comics. I think the MCU version could be really interesting, and I want to see it play out to its end. I don't want to see it uprooted just because the actor who played this character got into some trouble, allegedly. So we'll see how it all plays out. It'll be interesting to see the avenue they've taken. I think part and parcel, they're trying to hedge their bets now, and they're trying to play a little damage control. But I think Marvel is leaving themselves options, and that's a smart thing to do. But it'll be interesting to see the ultimate choice that they do make with this character of Kang and with the future of this phase and the next phase of the MCU. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Loki Season 2. I thought a really excellent season. If for anything, those last two episodes, if the last two episodes played out like the first 4 episodes, I probably wouldn't be saying this. But the last 2 episodes really made this season and really made a wonderful wrap up to a bigger story. Like I said, you really have to look at these 2 seasons as 2 halves of the same story, the same big story. And like I said, you have to look at this as 12 episodes. And now, granted, they probably could have knocked this down and did one 8 to 10 episode season. I think that may have been a smarter play, because there was a lot that happened in season 2 that kind of felt like fill. There were some things that could have been taken out, and I think the story would have been fine. They could have, like I said, did just one long 8-10 episode season instead of 2 6-episode seasons. But ultimately, if you look at this from episode 1 of season 1 to episode 6 of season 2, you get the bigger picture, and that ending just makes it all worthwhile, worth all the time and energy you invested in watching this series. So ultimately, really like this. It was a thinking man's Marvel series on Disney Plus. You had to pay attention. This wasn't a casual watch, but it was definitely worth it and definitely enjoyable. I want to thank everyone for listening to my thoughts on Loki season 2. You can check out more that's going on with Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe on our Facebook and Instagram pages. We're always posting stuff about horror, fantasy, and science fiction, as well as what's going on with our latest episodes. No matter where you're listening to this episode, please like, subscribe, follow the podcast so you can stay on top of all these episodes. We've got tons of bonus content that we're always putting out, so you can check that out. And no matter what you do, leave those reviews. 5 stars would be awesome, but whatever review you leave, we do appreciate that. It helps the algorithms and all that. So you talk about science fiction, that science fiction mumbo jumbo with social media. That I don't completely understand, but I know just enough to be dangerous. But please leave those reviews and share this podcast with anyone that you know that loves horror, fantasy, and science fiction. So until next time. Thank you for visiting Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe. We hope that you found something to your liking and visit the shop again soon. But even though you may come back, you never really get to leave Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe.